How do good lawyers become great general counsels?
Key skill that makes a great general counsel is understanding legal frameworks and think about problems not in terms of risk.
Thomas Umberg is VP and Head of Legal at Globality.
With experience at Weil Gotshal and Shepard Mullen and a Tech GC charter member.
Recognized for designing efficient legal workflows using AI and automation to build fast, frictionless, high-performing legal teams.
I've seen legal teams are shrinking primarily because they're using a lot of AI in the company.
The reliance on or your ability to utilize AI has diminished the need for higher headcounts. I can use AI and get an idea, but the stakes are too high that you actually need an expert.
You also have been a pro bono lawyer for a very long time. Why should lawyers do that?
If I'm capable of making legal resources more accessible to those that wouldn't necessarily have them, then I see it as my duty.
Somebody who is watching this show, like a younger lawyer, and they're still figuring out whether to pursue their career in the law firm and become a partner versus join in-house and become a general counsel, what guidance can you give on that?
I think.
Tom Umberg, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Tom, I've seen your journey, how you progressed from law firms. You also been a pro bono lawyer, and now you are a general counsel at Globality. Tell me, how do good lawyers become great general counsels?
That's a great question. I think the key skill that makes a great general counsel is one that's developed from a foundation in law, understanding legal frameworks. That's table stakes for being a general counsel. And then the ones who become a great general counsel are the ones that can take that framework and think about it creatively and think about problems not in terms of risk and legal regulations, and really think about it creatively. How do we get to yes? And in our process or journey of getting to that yes, what are the ways in which we can mitigate risk the most? So to make that a little bit more specific, perhaps, when you're at the law firm practicing, you are largely evaluating the cost or the risk side of the analysis. That's what you're focused on. That's where you're diving deep. The great general counsels understand that, but they're able to put that next to the benefits or the cost of slowing down. And they're able to make judgment calls or help their leaders make judgment calls around getting to yes, getting to the business objectives.
So basically, what you're saying is lawyers also need a lot of business acumen and business knowledge to mitigate those business risks. Am I right?
Yeah, they're a business strategist who just so happens to have an understanding of the law, and that's why you're being called into the conversation. But that is not the value that you're adding. The value you're adding is your business strategy, which is couched in a legal framework.
And do they teach you that in the law school?
I wish I could say yes, but I would say the answer is no. They teach you, and don't get me wrong. I actually really enjoyed law school, and I found it intellectually fascinating. But what I personally learned in law school was a process of how to learn. So I didn't get much of here's the laws, memorize these laws, and try to apply these laws. It's here's a novel problem. What's the process through which you should go through to get to a correct answer, or to educate yourself such that you'd be able to get to that correct answer? How do you analyze the law? How do you get to truth? That's what I learned in law school, which is not necessarily a business strategist mindset. It helps. It absolutely helps, but it's slightly different.
hmm You also have been a pro bono lawyer for a very long time. I think you still help people pro bono. Why is that important to you, and why should lawyers do that?
Um, I, I I don't think it should be limited to lawyers. I think every person has an obligation to try to make the world a better place. That's something that was taught to me by my parents, who firmly believe it and still practice it. Um, the law is just one tool that I have in my arsenal to accomplish that goal. And I spent enough time and money acquiring the skills that I feel like it's imperative of me to share that. Legal access is crucial for a highly functioning society. And if I'm capable of making legal resources more accessible to those that wouldn't necessarily have them, um, then I see it as my duty. It's some of the most rewarding work I've done in the legal profession.
Hmm. And is legal access really accessible to the people at large in the US?
Depends on what the type of legal services that we're talking about, but I think if we were to make a generalized statement, I would feel pretty confident saying no. High quality legal services for highly consequential matters are expensive. These are highly trained lawyers that come from highly coveted law firms. And if it wasn't for pro bono work, they would mostly be safeguarded by those with immense resources. Um, I'm excited about the direction in which the legal landscape is changing, particularly with AI, because I think one of the crucial aspects of AI is it allows legal resources to be scaled efficiently and to be distributed more broadly.
Hmm. If you have to talk about, let's say, Tom, one of the toughest challenge you faced in your career, and how did that challenge or event or transaction change you as a lawyer and as a person?
Um, it's this is a little bit more meta than dealing just specifically with legal, but it was for me. It was the point in my career where I had been at the law firm for roughly 5 years, and I was starting to have these existential kind of thoughts that the law wasn't for me. I didn't. I was no longer practicing with the same vigor and passion as I was when I'd come into the law firm, and I started to feel a little bit like I was a cog in the system as opposed to someone who was helping people, thinking creatively, and I sort of wanted to throw my hands up and say, I'm done with it. I'm going to go try something else. And to a certain extent, I sort of did. When I left the law firm, I came to Globality, and I fully intended on trying to play a pseudo lawyer, pseudo business operational role, which I luckily had the opportunity to do. But I think the underlying realization, which I carry with me to this day, is that um, you got to look at problems through a number of different lenses. And I was focused on the law through the lens of the law firm doing a specific practice, which was M&A. When I looked at the law through a different lens, which was in-house with a pseudo business operational role where I'm dealing with novel issues and I'm having to teach myself new bodies of law, I fell in love with the law again. And I found it to be just as intellectually stimulating as it was when I walked into the law firm day one. I was applying new skills. I was acquiring new skills, and it was a revitalization of my passion for the law. And that was something that I try to carry with me when I get frustrated on different endeavors, to try to reframe the thinking, look at it through a different lens. And I think oftentimes you can find a silver lining, or when you reposition it, you can find a new path forward.
Absolutely. So, Tom, do you think this existential issue is with lawyers a lot in the US after 5, 10 years of spending their time in law? They think, you know what, I'm done, and they want to change their career. Is that a trend?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't have the hard data on this, but I'd be willing to make a bet with some degree of confidence that there's a huge exodus from law firms after roughly between years 3 and 5. That's when they feel like they've been trained, but that's not where their passion lies. And so they feel like they have enough general skills to go and apply that elsewhere. I fell into that camp. I think it's similar to the way a lot of people feel after 3 to 5 years. Some people love that aspect, love that work environment, love going. I use the analogy, a lot of times you're at a law firm, you're an inch wide, but you're a mile deep. Some people love that. They want to be an expert on a specific area. When you go in house, you're more generally a mile wide and an inch deep. I like to think I'm a little bit more than an inch deep, but the concept still holds, where you don't have the ability to be an absolute expert on one thing, but what you lose in that respect, you gain in the ability to be learning new things, and your skill set's a lot broader, and which is what's necessary when you're guiding a business and helping come to their appropriate business decisions.
And Tom, let's say somebody who is watching this show, like a younger lawyer in their early 20s, early 30s, and they're still figuring out whether to pursue their career in the law firm and become a partner versus join in-house and become a general counsel. How should somebody choose this two paths? Like which path to choose? Like what guidance can you give on that?
It's a good question. Let's see. I think one of the most important things for a young lawyer, or really any young professional to have, is a really, really good mentor. And I would frame the question as, in what area are you going to find the better mentor that is going to invest in you? If that's at a law firm and you don't like the law firm, you are still making yourself more prepared to be a general counsel by you acquiring the skills that you do at a law firm. I learned how to be a professional, how to meet deadlines, how to communicate clearly, how to write well. Um, and that was because I had partners that were investing in me and they were teaching me these things. I think that if I would have made the jump earlier than I did, I probably would have made myself a less effective in-house counsel. So I don't know that the more time you spend at a law firm, the better law firm lawyer you become, or the more time you spend in-house, the better in-house lawyer you become. It's really about how do you collect the soup of skills, and to me, the most efficient way to do that is through mentorship.
And how would you suggest, let's say, younger lawyers who are graduating this year, next year, or people who graduated last year, how can they find great mentors?
Um, be proactive. I have found that particularly in the legal profession, there is a sense of camaraderie and community amongst lawyers where there is largely a desire by more senior lawyers to want to mentor and to want to ensure the longevity of the profession. So I think that a large part of it is just being proactive, engaging in conversations. The mentors are pretty much never going to find you. You have to go and find the mentor, and you have to show them that you're willing to listen to their advice. You want to work hard. If you have a personal relationship with them, all of the better. But I would say start making phone calls, sending cold emails, asking people to coffee. But when you do that, when you do ask people for coffee, don't just come in and say, "What should I do?" You need to become thoughtfully prepared with questions that relate to you, that the person has expertise on. Show them that you are a motivated person and you want to get something from them, yes, but you're also willing to give them something, or at least put in effort into that process.
Mhm. And this relationship building or networking, you can call it whatsoever, uh, has to be long term, has to be well thought through, has to be authentic. How do you suggest that younger lawyers can make this not just a one-way path of taking something or trying to extract something from the mentor, but like a how can they invest in a truly authentic relationship with the mentor? Any guidance on that?
I mean, you can't manufacture it, so it has to be genuine. And so, given that you can't manufacture it, you almost sort of have to play the numbers game. If you go to coffee with 10 people, one of them you might have a real relationship with. And that's the one where you need to continue to foster that relationship. You can't expect every single coffee or potential mentor mentee relationship is going to be as fruitful, because that's just not the way human relationships work. You need to find one where you respect them and they respect you. And I don't think it's too dissimilar from dating. I wouldn't say dating is a numbers game, not since I'm working from home with my wife in earshot, but it's there's a lot of similarities between the two.
Okay, brilliant. Tell us about in Globality, how big is the legal team?
Legal team is two lawyers right now. We're very, very lean.
Uh, spoken to about 40 plus general counsels across US, and I've seen legal teams are shrinking primarily because they're using a lot of AI in the company as well. Uh, how much of AI do you use, and do you believe with the advent of AI and so much of AI being used in the company, your reliance on the outside counsel is going to reduce massively?
Um, I'll take that sort of in parts. Yes, the reliance on or your ability to utilize AI has diminished the need for higher headcounts. One good lawyer can do the work of two or three good lawyers, in my experience, or two to three average lawyers. So the times of needing to build a fiefdom in order to have a highly functioning legal department, I don't think that exists anymore. Now I think of it more as, how do you build the systems? I think of lawyers now as system architects, and the system that we're building is the legal apparatus. How do we set up a process through which risk mitigation is going to naturally occur, and efficiency is already built into it? Is that an intake process? Is that making contracts self-serve for our sales team because we put playbooks into AI and they can actually see redlines without having to go through lawyers? So it's really about, how do you come up with a system that pulls us as people out of the way to let the business function and operate full speed, but making sure those systems have the appropriate guardrails. So that's sort of the question around, does AI allow you to have a lower head count? I think unequivocally the answer is yes. The second question, I believe, was around the application of AI. Sorry, remind me one more time.
Yeah, reliance of your reliance on outside counsel, is it
Oh,
reducing, and
yes.
what do you think? Yeah.
So the way I use outside counsel is going back to that analogy, mile deep, inch wide. I use outside counsel for specialist questions. I don't really have any work streams that are de facto handed to an outside counsel. We handle our commercial work, we handle our employment work. But granted, there's always these corner case situations where we're going into a new jurisdiction and I need local counsel in Poland or Russia, and I can use AI and get an idea, but the stakes are too high. And even if something is 95% accurate or 99% accurate, there's a situation where the stakes of inaccuracy become so great that you actually need an expert. So I don't know that as of right now, my use of outside counsel will go down because of AI. I do hope and I do expect of my outside counsel that their bills go down, because I expect them to be using AI, and I expected them to be more efficient than they were 5 years ago on a similar task.
But their bills are not going down. I mean, now the outside counsel are charging $2,000 per hour, even $3,000 per hour, and the bills are increasing. So there's also some lot of articles came, uh, the death of law firm, primarily because AI is doing a lot of stuff the law firm is doing. Do you believe in that concept?
Um, yeah, I've seen the articles. I've seen that data. It's disappointing for me to see, but it's not surprising that these intelligent people have come up with ways to make sure that they um, maintain their profits per partner, which continue to go up as well. And I guess the near term solution that they've come up with is, if it's going to take us less time to do a task, we better charge more for that time. And so hourly rates are going up, even if quantity of hours worked may be going down. Is that sustainable? No. I think there's, in a capitalistic society, someone's going to improve on that model, and someone's going to finally prove out that we can actually do equal, if not better quality work for less money and less time. And I think those law firms and those lawyers and those outside counsels will be the winners of the next decade.
Absolutely. Tom, tell us, do you think so when the younger lawyers were joining the workforce, they were doing a lot of first drafts and legal research and the basic study, and the senior lawyer will review the work of associate. And now all that first draft, the legal research is done by AI. Do you think younger lawyers will have difficulty finding jobs?
It's a scary question to contemplate, because I think people are reticent to say it out loud. But yes, I think that that's the natural consequence of this. 10 years ago, the way the model worked, the way you just described it, is law firms had an interest in training young associates, and those young associates become the senior associates. And even if they were not necessarily a profitable endeavor, a first or second year associate in terms of output created and dollars brought in, versus what it costs to train them and the time the partners need to spend sitting down with them, that was still necessary in the long term. Now I don't know that that's necessary. And if you take out that aspect and it's not necessary for a law firm to train the young associates for their larger model to work, then I get nervous that there will be a lot fewer well-trained junior associates and eventually well-trained senior associates, because it's just not happening at the same frequency. I imagine some law firms will realize that and be a little bit more long-term oriented and say, we're going to train you. But then they need to deal with defections. And if they get to year 3 or 5 and an attorney leaves, that hurts the P&L. So these are difficult questions that the legal industry is having to grapple with right now. And I guess not just the legal industry, anywhere that's professional. AI is ubiquitous. AI is intelligent. AI does not sleep. But that has profound implications for an industry like legal.
Hmm. So if a younger lawyer associate, a person, law school grad who's graduating this year, next year, how should they how should they do their career? How should they start their career when the AI is around? What should they do?
I think they should think of themselves as legal technologists. Do not focus on being a lawyer. Focus on the systems that are being built up right now that are changing the way law is practiced, and become experts in those systems. That also requires knowledge of the law. That doesn't mean that you're just a tech guru and you're no longer a lawyer. You just need to have both now. If you're scared of using ChatGPT or building an agent yourself, or you don't feel like you really understand what the benefit of doing that is, then you need to double click into that quickly, because I think that's the skill set that's going to be table stakes going forward.
Hmm. You mentioned in the earlier conversation, you mentioned that you have built some systems in your company which your sales team, marketing team can use, so that they use the system and they come to you less and less. If you can tell us a little bit of more detail, what are those systems and how are you building them? What tools are you using to build those systems?
Sure. I use a couple of different tools. Some are homegrown, some are third party systems bought. I would say at the most fundamental level, every lawyer and every person can be building out their own agents. Costs virtually nothing. And we have an enterprise ChatGPT account. And in that ChatGPT account, I have a privacy agent, I have a commercial agent, I have a corporate agent, I have an employment agent. And each of those agents take maybe 3-4 hours to set up, but it's not technologically advanced. I'm not a coder. I was never a technical person per se, but anyone who's willing to kind of sit there and think through the problems and converse with ChatGPT about what they should be doing to set it up, they can do it. It's largely a process of giving it the relevant context. So for us, for the commercial counsel, they need to have all of our template agreements. So they understand what our baselines are. They have our playbooks. They have what Globality does. They need the context of what system we're operating in. Where are our customers? So what regulatory frameworks apply? And then I can have conversations with those agents. And I really think of them as my team, my associates. It's not at a state where you can just use what comes out of those agents as truth and send it up the flagpole to leadership or give it to a client. But it is a great starting point. The same way you would use an associate's research or memo. That's the way I use it. I read it. I look for their citations. I click into their citations. It puts me on the right path virtually all the time. So that's kind of the low-hanging fruit, in my opinion. I've built through a company called Airtable a intake/matter management system, which consists of largely forms, and it's available to the company. They know where to find these links, and say you have a new commercial contract or a new NDA that needs to be reviewed and signed. It gathers the requisite information I would need to do that review, or an associate with us would need to do that review, notifies the appropriate people, and triggers that process. And in some situations, it actually will say, hey, this is a vendor contract that's doesn't meet the parameters for needing legal review, so just go ahead and sign the deal. If you have the finance approval, this isn't a question for legal. This is a de minimis contract where we're not exchanging IP rights and there's no personally identifiable information involved. Go for it. We don't need to be a bottleneck in that process. So it helps suss out irrelevant requests, and that's obviously a good thing. And then the most legal tech tool we use is one called Ivo.ai, which great company, great founding team, highly responsive, built by lawyers, and you can tell by the product. And this helps with commercial contract review. So it ingests and understands our playbooks for different areas, whether it's a DPA, a data privacy addendum, or an MSA, or an NDA. You can put it through the system and it will say, based upon your playbook, here's your suggested red lines. Also, we saw these three things which are off market given you're in B2B SaaS in the US. And so it gives me a starting point where I can go through and I can start to almost review a first draft as opposed to creating that first draft, which changes my job going back to the solutions engineer. Now what I'm finding myself doing more and more is I'm paying a lot more attention to my playbooks, because my playbooks, I realize, are becoming the engine of the legal department. They're the gasoline that's feeding these AI systems. So now I'm particularly careful about making sure our playbooks are up to date, accurate. If I notice the AI didn't pick up an issue I'd want to pick up on, it's probably an issue with my playbook. So I'll go back into my playbook and I'll tweak the wording, and I'll describe the issue a little different, or give it my fallback position in a little different way. So now when I'm reviewing contracts, it's about 50% working on that document, and it's about 50% up-leveling my playbook, which is in essence up-leveling the AI agent that's reviewing these contracts for the first pass.
Brilliant. So like training the AI to make it work for you, building custom GPTs, custom workflows, custom agents, training them with the right data, making sure that the playbooks are up to date and they're correct so that you can play with the right agent and get the knowledge wisdom that you're looking for.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So how has the role of GCs changed over last 5 years after AI has come?
I wish I could say that I'm an authority on that topic. I've only been a GC for just about 5 years, not even. So I may not be the perfect person to ask this question, but I get the sense from I talk to a lot of people, going back to the whole needing mentors to be good. I seek out mentors, and those are typically older, more experienced GCs. And I get the sense that it is much more about creating systems and processes than it is about applying law. So you are a product engineer to some extent, and your job is largely how do you put together the correct tech stack that works with the nuances of your business to deliver these legal outcomes that you want, which is slightly different than what it was, I think, 5-10 years ago, which was how do you hire the right people and acquire the correct human knowledge and make insourcing versus outsourcing calls correctly. That was the skill set. Now I really think it's how do you get the correct tech under the hood and connect them all in the right way.
And how do you, since you also work with outside counsel, how do you think the role of outside counsel as the partners and senior associates, how are their role changed with respect to AI after using AI?
It's a good question. They should be. It should be if they're functioning correctly, in my opinion. Um, I so we had I'll give you a specific example of how I thought the evolution occurred on a specific use case and why I liked it. Um, so there's this new body of regulation coming out in the EU called DORA, and it essentially relates to Data Authorization Resiliency Act. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's what the acronym is. And it affects financial institutions and their third-party providers. And we service a lot of financial institutions in the EU. And so we started to get inundated with these customers saying, hey, you have to sign these DORA addendums or we're going to be, we're no longer be in compliance with the law. And that's going to trigger a bunch of default events. And eventually we could walk away from the contract if we can't become compliant collectively with this DORA Act. I did not have time, quite frankly, or the expertise off the bat to review all of these. And I could have done one of two things. I could have hired, I guess one of three things. I could hire a person who's an expert in this. I myself could become an expert in this, or I'd go to outside counsel. I don't anticipate this being a work stream that's going to last a long time. And it was slightly more, I just didn't have the capacity to become an expert at that point. So it was outside counsel. The way I wish I worked with outside counsel on this was similar to what we just talked about with the commercial contracts. I want you, outside counsel, to help me come up with a playbook that I can actually plug into my AI system and have that provide redlines to me. I will then review those redlines. And if I have specific questions about them, I'll come back to you and ask them. But I do not want to be sending you every DORA that I get and having your lawyers mark that up. I just want one download of your knowledge into a codified playbook, which can fit nicely into an AI system. And then I'll come back to you ad hoc with questions. I thought that worked really well for that use case. I can see myself doing it again in a variety of different ways.
If you had to, so lawyers work very hard, especially in the US, and uh, is that a culture thing that lawyers work very hard and this build 2,000 hours a year, 2,500 hours a year, and they're competing with each other on who builds more hours? Is that a trend?
I don't know if it's a trend or just a feature of the industry. It's definitely true. There are a lot of type A personalities that become lawyers. It requires a lot of education and a lot of work to get there. So naturally, you have a lot of highly motivated people that feed off of competition with themselves or with others. And that's largely what's driven them to be so successful academically or whatever it was. I I don't know that it's unique to lawyers either. I think that you could say a lot of bankers, a lot of other doctors, a lot of other areas in which it requires a lot of education and patience breed that personality type. And obviously there's other professions that work equally as hard, but I think that there's just a type A personality that's driven to the professional sector. Teachers work really hard. Doctors, like my wife who raises kids, she works equally, if not more hard than I do. But it's there is something about the law and going to law school, and law school in of itself is a abnormally competitive environment because grades are relative to others, and that doesn't really go away once you get to the law firm.
So, lawyers make a lot of sacrifices to grow in their career as well. And somebody told me, Amit, make sure you do not pay too much for your money. Which basically means that I think lawyers in the US are paying too much for their money in the sense they're missing their spouse events, their kids' birthday parties, and sometimes they're late for important functions and events. Do you think lawyers in the US are paying too much for their money?
I think it's a personal. I think it's a personal decision. Different things motivate different people, and different people have different end goals. And I don't purport to think that one is better than another. I know a lot of people that are at least appear to me to be incredibly happy because they feel like they're at the pinnacle of their profession. They are incredibly smart. Yes, they have a lot of money, and yes, that motivates some of them. But I also know others that I don't think money is the primary motivator. So I don't want to say I don't want to opine and say that they're wrong and they're sacrificing too much for that, because that's their goals and their sacrifice. I can say for me personally, it definitely was a factor. I loved the law firm that I was at. I loved the people that I was with. But there was one specific moment, and I don't. We could talk about whether this should actually go in any podcast because I don't know if this person's going to be watching, but I'll share it anecdotally. Um, there was we were on, I think, hour 36 straight of being in the office working on an M&A deal that was on an incredibly tight timeline. And I was already starting to become a little bit disgruntled and starting to get a little bit weary of the law firm lifestyle. And I was working and I was delirious because I've been working for so long. I didn't go home the night before, worked through the night. And I looked at the end of the hallway and the partner was there and he was working as well. And one part of me is like, you know what? That's motivating. Like, that's our leader. He's in the trenches with us. That's awesome. I love that. Then another part of me, and it was kind of the first time I had this realization, I was like, oh crap. Like, if I work really, really, really hard for the next 5 years and I get lucky, then maybe I can have that life. And I was just starting to get very, very serious with my now wife, and we were starting to think long term. And I realized that I don't know that I would want that life. And so you kind of do need to make sure you have a North Star and you need to know what's at the end of the path in which you're on. And so that was a moment where I said, look, the path I'm on is leading to that. Maybe if I'm lucky, it's leading to that. And if that's not what I want, then it's on me to make the change. So for me personally, I made the decision at that point that I think you said the I'm paying too much for the money. It was more about, yeah, I'm paying too much in terms of life experiences, relationships, starting a family, and for the money and the intellectual stimulation I was getting.
Thank you for sharing that, Tom. Means a lot. So, Tom, what is success for you?
For me,
Yeah,
yeah, we have to be more specific. Professionally, personally,
both.
I have a bunch of young kids right now. So I have a 4.5 year old, a almost 3 year old, and a 6 month old. And so a lot of my thoughts focus around them. And success for me is raising really, really happy, well rounded children. That's paramount. I want to be a good husband. I want to be a good father. Uh, I don't know if I can elaborate much further than that. And then professionally, I want to stay curious and I want to always be in a place where I feel like I can continue to grow, whether that be professionally because there's more places I can climb, more responsibilities I can take on, or intellectually because I'm being given new bodies to pay attention to, new areas of the law, or maybe not even the law. Maybe it's an operational role. I want to always feel like I'm doing something that's slightly outside of my comfort zone, and I want to feel confident that despite it being outside of my comfort zone, I can eventually make it comfortable. And I hope I never lose that curiosity and drive to get comfortable in the novel areas.
Any professional regrets, Tom?
I wore a very, very ugly suit to my first day as a summer associate. And not only was it ugly, but I was the only one in the suit. And so that one sticks with me. But yeah, I think, do I have things that I would do differently? Yeah. It's weird because like sometimes I'm like, you know what, I wish I would have worked harder. I wish I would have pulled more all nighters. And sometimes I'm like, you know what, I wish I would have pulled back a little bit more. I don't know if I really got the ROI from those hours from 12 to 4 a.m. that I worked. So I try to not really think about it too hard in terms of what do I regret and what would I change, because at the end of the day, they're all learning lessons. I don't think you can grow without doing stuff in maybe the in a way that you might regret later. Like you sort of have to make mistakes to grow and to learn. So I don't know if I have one thing in particular that I would call out professionally, but they're definitely there. But I appreciate all of them for being there.
Brilliant. Tom, tell us about your most important professional chapter and why.
Um, It was probably when I took the reins at Globality. Prior to being there was no dedicated GC or legal role. And so I sort of had to sift through the mess and do a lot of kind of discovery work. Where are we at? Where are the gaps? And despite having been at the company for a couple of years, it was all new to me. Like the fact that we did or did not have outside counsel giving opinions on what I would consider to be pretty material matters was terrifying. And so finding all of that you have tech debt, you also can have legal debt. Finding all of that legal debt and prioritizing it and saying, here's where we have the biggest opportunity to either reduce our risk footprint or improve operations. That was a hair-raising experience that I think now we're on the other side of it, and the ship has sort of stabilized. And I'm quite frankly, I'm proud of the way that we went from there to here, disentangled the mess, for the most part, kept our cool, didn't get frustrated with anyone as we kind of tried to learn this muscle memory that was the legal department within an organization that concept was somewhat foreign to.
Hmm. And Tom, at Globality, so many teams come to you, product heads, marketing heads, and sometimes you have to say no to them. How do you handle conflict at such an important nodal point in the company where you are general counsel, people are looking up to you, people come to you for solutions, people come to you for answers, and there are conflicts. How do you handle conflicts?
You know, I think fundamentally you start with the premise that we're on the same team. This is not a you versus me thing. This is a us collectively trying to get to the same goal, which is a successful, socially responsible company. And so anytime there's the perception of conflict, usually it's a lack of understanding about the consequences if we do something incorrectly. And so I really see the role as not telling them why they're wrong. It's really teaching why I feel differently than they do. And usually that's couched in legal, because look, if we do this, our risk profile with relation to outbound emails is going to go up. And although it's maybe a 5% likelihood that we actually get a regulatory agency to come and look over our shoulders, if that were to happen, the consequences would be devastating. Everything would slow down. Your ability to market to anyone would go to zero. So you have to phrase it in terms of, here's why I feel the way I do. And they're going to say why they feel the way that they do too. And they're going to say that the benefit of doing it is so great. And there are times when, look, another C-suite wants to do something. I'm telling them it's legally risky. They say, I still want to do it. And quite frankly, it's not usually. There are select situations where you do have to say, no matter what, this is a no. But most situations, it's not my role to say no. It's my role to help them understand the legal risks, and make sure that the person making that decision has the appropriate authority and has that understanding. There are situations where they understand the benefit side of that cost benefit analysis better than I do. And so I don't want to act like, because I understand the costs really wrong or really well, that I will have the right answer. So it's teaching, it's getting to the same goal, really.
Uh, Tom, I've been talking to a bunch of general counsel in the US, and I see that there's a slight trend in general counsels adopting more than the GC role, taking the role of the chief human resource as well, they're taking the role of chief people officer. Do you see the trend as well, general counsel taking more roles than legal role?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty common overlap between human resources and legal. I think info security sometimes can fall within the legal purview. Um, there are a lot of departments and functions which have a lot of overlap with legal. Uh, I'm fortunate that we have an incredibly talented chief human resource officer who knows her stuff really, really well. and she has a skill set that has been fostered over many, many years of experience working with people within these organizations. And we have a great relationship where she relies on my legal expertise, but she has a better understanding of how to recruit really, really well. What should a Series E company, what should the employment demography look like? Should we have a flat structure? Should we have it hierarchical? Or too many people reporting to one person? Stuff I have opinions on, but I think her opinions are probably more accurate than mine.
Hmm. Uh, Tom, tell us about what mistakes did you make in your career and what can we learn from them?
Um, let's see. I
Apart from the suit which you wore.
Yeah, I know that one popped in my head again. It's I oscillate on this one because sometimes I think that it's a strength and sometimes I think it's my weakness. But being hyper focused on what you want or where you want to end up professionally, that is something that some people have and some people don't, where they know and they have known since they were 8 years old, I want to do this and this is what I want to become. I struggle with that. I actually want to do a lot of things. And so it's a little bit hard for me psychologically to close doors because I'm so interested in so many different things. And sometimes I feel like that can inhibit me from getting to where I want to be, or at least at the pace at which I want to get there. But in the same vein, I also think that it keeps me um, it keeps me curious. It keeps me excited about growth. It makes me want to learn more about different things. And as I'm getting older, I'm kind of seeing this pattern where having a broad base allows me to do some pattern recognition outside of my vertical, which I don't know that I'd be able to do if I didn't have some operational experience, if I didn't have some M&A experience. In a past life, I worked in the music industry, and if I developed a lot of IP expertise there, if I didn't have that, I'm able to kind of put together these disparate pieces into a cohesive image about what the current state of affairs are.
Hmm. And so are you wired? So do people have to understand how they are wired? For example, like you might be wired to go a mile wide and a deep and an inch deep. How do you identify your wiring? Because if you want to go in a GC role, you want to go mile wide and deep inch and in an inch deep. Whereas in a law firm, it's the other way around. How do you identify your wiring?
Um, I I think it's something that I think becomes obvious to you as you progress through life. Um, when you were younger, did you get hyper focused on one hobby for a very, very extended period of time? Or were you someone who loved learning new hobbies? Um, I think that's kind of probably the first indication of the way in which you're wired. Um, as you're becoming more of a professional, you're always going to have an opportunity to raise your hand for certain work assignments. Do you find yourself wanting to raise your hand for work assignments that are more similar to what you've done in the past, or do you find yourself gravitating towards the work assignments that are different? If it's the latter, you might be wired to be more of a generalist. If it's the former, then maybe it's a great thing. If it's the former, the world needs these specialists. Then maybe you are a inch wide, mile deep type of person.
If you have to give an advice to our listeners who are graduating this year, next year, what advice would you give them apart from building systems and processes with AI? Uh, what advice would you give them from your career?
Um, find ways to get experience creatively. For me, that was pro bono work. I think that you can collect a lot of experience without having someone pay you for it. And despite not receiving monetary compensation in the here and the now, you're collecting skills and experience which you'll undoubtedly be compensated for in one way or the other down the line. So be creative with the way in which you're going to acquire experiences, which leads to expertise. And don't necessarily feel like you have to be compensated directly for every endeavor you do, because it's a little short sighted, and you're going to lose out on some opportunities to acquire really quality experience.
Tom, tell us what keeps you up at night when it comes to your work or comes to AI, apart from kids.
Outside of my 6 month old, yeah, primarily it's the 6 month old, but then on the professional front, it's the fear of the unknown. There's a lot of unknown going on right now, so any general counsel at any time in history is scared about what they don't know within the organization. Um, are there vendors that we've been brought on that somehow made it around our vendor onboarding process and it's going to blow up our GDPR compliance? Are employees taking source code and putting it onto their computer and trying to do work on their computer, which is highly susceptible to being hacked? Those things which you can't know for sure, but are likely happening, you try to mitigate them, but you know you're never going to have your arms around them. So there's the fear of the unknown with respect to what's going on within the organization. And then right now, there's a I don't know if it's fear, but there's a lot of unknown around the regulatory framework that is AI. What is that going to look like in 5 years? How do we stay compliant? How do I stay one step ahead of the regulators in terms of what we're building now is going to be regulated by regulations that are yet to be in existence. And so we're not going to be able to build something now. And then in 3 months, when the regulation comes down, we don't have time to go back and redo it because it now affects it. So I need to be ahead of the curve, looking around the corner and giving those insights back to the product team. And they need to be using that and building with those insights in mind. The scary part about that is I wish I could say that I was highly confident about what I see around the corner, but I don't think anyone really is. There are certain principles that are kind of surfacing to the top across all of these different regulations, which we can kind of glean across all of them and say, here are guiding principles for how we should think about AI at this point. But there's no checklist that we can say, hey, if we check all of these boxes, we're good on AI and we can roll this product out. And that makes me nervous.
So, is the U.S. Congress currently building a regulatory and framework around AI?
They purportedly are. I'm sure that there are different regulatory frameworks on a federal level that are being proposed. Right now, it's very similar to the privacy framework, where it's a hodgepodge of state laws that are being enacted, and there's some similarities between the two, but it's not necessarily always identical. And so you need to think about what's our presence, where is our software being used, what are the AI regulations there, and what is being contemplated. Uh, the EU AI Act is probably the broadest AI regulatory framework in existence. And what we're seeing in the US now is very similar patchwork type of systems being built up within the states. There was an attempt by Congress to preempt any state laws and say, states, you guys can't write any AI laws because we as the federal government are going to come out and we're going to come out with a cohesive framework that will apply to everyone, which would be good if we could have confidence that would be done thoughtfully and soon enough where we'd have clarity. I'm not so confident in that, but that was shot down as the last minute of the tax bill. So that moratorium on state laws has been lifted, and we're seeing different state laws, particularly here in California, popping up.
Interesting. Uh, Last question, Tom. Uh, Although we're very young, but have you thought about what legacy you want to leave when we leave this world, and how do you want to be remembered?
Whew, real light one to end. Um, I mean, it's cheesy, it's corny, and it's simplistic. But when I'm laying on my deathbed, I want to think that the world is a better place because I was in it. Um, There's a lot of different ways you can achieve that. Um, from a professional standpoint, I want to participate in the way that AI laws, because that's what I'm interested in right now. While I participate in the way AI laws are made, I think the consequences of doing it incorrectly can be profound from a national security standpoint and just from a human equality standpoint. So I would love to say that something I did helped to make those laws fair, just, and allowed for AI to be disseminated and used beneficially for all of humanity.
So you believe AI will play a very important role in humanity, and so as a lawyer, what can you do? What can we do to make sure these policies built around AI are helping and not deterring?
We probably talk for a couple hours on that one. So I think some core principles that, in my opinion, need to be there. There needs to be some level of accountability behind these models. If there are really egregious biases baked into them, there has to be processes through which we can check that, pull that back. The ubiquity of AI is going to be so profound that if we get it wrong, it's going to create massive inequality, because it's going to take any bias that was it was trained upon, and it's going to just balloon it. It's going to compound upon itself. And so we have to be very thoughtful about what the training data is, that the training data is representative of humans, broadly speaking, and our morals and what we want to achieve, or alignment, as I think the AI terminology would be, that it's aligned appropriately. In order to do that, I think about the world through incentives. So you can give a carrot or you can hit them with a stick. The carrot is, if you build a good AI, then consumers will buy it, and maybe the government can figure out ways to um, give a prize, for lack of a better term. Or there's the stick methodology, where hey, if you build AI and you release it to the public and it does something profoundly bad, it teaches a terrorist organization how to make a nuclear bomb, and we decide that's one thing that we want to unequivocally prevent, then you need to have suffer consequences. Otherwise, there's going to be new models that'll be developed, and they won't take those considerations as seriously.
Hmm. Yeah, you seem to have read a couple of deep research reports about AI, which I've also read. The AI alignment is a very big issue, which we can, of course, talk for next few days as well. But I want to thank you, Tom, today for your wisdom and your very authentic and unfiltered answers. You were very gracious enough to share all your wisdom with us today, with our audience, and really want to thank you for sharing it with us. And thank you for your time today.
Thanks. It was great chatting. I enjoyed it.